Hello and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to Korag in Highmaul. And in this video we're going to show you how to kill the boss in both normal and heroic difficulties, because you can use the same tactic to kill the boss in both difficulties.
Now this encounter consists of just Korag by himself, and he pretty much just constantly spams you with a bunch of horrible magic abilities that you really need to deal with, otherwise you're going to die very quickly. He also does have a mechanic where you get to like absorb a huge shield and run around collecting orbs and stuff. It's just a really fucking good fight.
Now for this encounter you do want to bring 2 tanks. For a 10 man you want to bring 3 healers, and for a 30 man you want to bring around 6 healers. But it is very important to this fight that you do bring some spellcasters. You do need to have the magic damage going in on the boss because of one mechanic that we'll talk about in a moment. But bringing physical damage is perfectly fine as well. Now first off, we're going to talk about the main abilities that the boss uses very frequently, which is his Expel Magic abilities. Now for your tanks to worry about is Expel Magic Arcane. This will put a debuff on the tank that causes AoE pools to form under your feet that then shortly explode a couple of seconds afterwards. If you stand inside these pools when they go off, you're going to get destroyed. So as these pools are forming underneath you, you need to run around the room making sure that you don't get hit by them.
Now this debuff also increases the physical damage you take by 100%, so pretty much if the pools weren't enough for you to tank switch, well this is enough for you to tank switch. You really do need to switch at this point, and when you are running around like a nutcase because of all the pools underneath you, make sure you don't run over anyone else because the pools will just form on them and then they'll take the damage, so just be careful about that. Another Expel Magic ability is Fire. Now this is a debuff that is placed on the entire rage that will do ticking damage. Once the debuff runs out, it will explode and deal damage to you and all players within 5 yards. So when it is just about to expire, you've got to make sure that you spread out 5 yards and you don't blow up on anyone else. And melee, you've got to be extra careful. If you have got quite a melee stack grouped, you may need to run out of boss range, so your damage will go down, but at least you won't fucking die.
Now with this debuff, it is actually a magical effect, so technically you can dispel it, but there really isn't any need to. And if you do decide to dispel it, it will still explode like it does when it reaches its duration anyway, so you don't gain too much from dispelling. The boss will also cast Expel Magic Frost. This will spawn an orb on a random ranged player's location, and when the orb first spawns, it does a load of damage to the entire raid. However, after that point, it doesn't do any damage at all. However, the closer you are to this orb, the more you'll be slowed, and if you move far enough away, you won't be slowed at all. So the idea is that when this does come in, use Stampeding Roars and just run the hell away from it. And the last Expel Magic that the boss will do is something called Expel Magic Shadow. Now this will put a Healing Absorb shield on every single player in the entire raid, and the only way to remove this Healing Absorb shield is of course to heal it up. Now the amount it actually absorbs is fairly large, so this pretty much forces you to use a raid cooldown every single time. Otherwise people can die from other abilities that come in, such as the fire or the frost. This ability comes in roughly every 60 seconds or so you want to assign at least one of your healers to use a cooldown each time. It's also really important that when this does come in, that healers that aren't using healing cooldowns do spot heal the targets that are about to take damage, i.e. the tanks, because it could potentially be dangerous and they could die. Now because of the amount of AoE damage that is going out on the raid, which is mainly in burst, it's a good idea to have your entire raid stacked up for the entire fight. It means making healing up the shadows a lot easier, healing up the frosts a lot easier. The only thing that is kind of annoying for is fire, because it means that everyone has to move. But it also really helps with another mechanic called Suppression Field.
Now what the boss will do is target a random ranged player, and after a second he will run over, hit his hammer on the ground and spawn a suppression field. If you're inside of this field, it will silence you and deal ticking damage to you. Don't stand in the shield ever, it's really bad, and the field will last for about 1.5 minutes. Now the time between the boss targeting you and the time he actually reaches you and like dealing the damage and spawning the actual field itself is more than enough time to move and avoid taking damage. Just have your whole raid group just move in one direction away from it.
Now one of the last things you need to know in order to kill this boss is about his nullification barrier. Now this is a huge shield that just flat out absorbs all magic damage. Whilst the shield is up, he gains a stacking damage dealt increase buff, which is only removed and reset once the shield is removed. And the only way that you can remove the shield is by doing magical damage. This is why you need to bring magical damage DPS in order to kill this boss, because if you only had melee, the stack would never remove, the stack would go too high and you just end up one-hitting people.
Now once the boss's barrier is removed, a couple of things would happen. What will happen of course is that stacks will drop, but then the boss will run to the center of the room and stop casting any of his Expel Magic abilities or anything like that. He just sits there and starts recharging his shield, which takes 20 seconds. Now during this time, all magic damage dealt to him is increased by 100%, so magic dealing DPS want to save their cooldowns for this time, and if you've got a shit ton of magic dealing DPS, then maybe saving Bloodlust for this point so you can really get some nice boss damage in. It's not a bad idea.
Now while the boss is charging his shield, he'll also spawn adds over this 20-second period. All these adds will do is just melee hit, however they have one nasty thing, is that when they finally die, they'll do raid-wide damage that does a lot of damage. However, if these adds die within inside a suppression field, they are silenced and therefore they cannot cast anything, which means they won't do any damage to the raid.
So what you want to do is have your tank pick up all of the adds while the rest of the DPS just constantly tunnel in on the boss, because of course the boss is taking a shit ton more damage at this point. The tank should be able to get the adds somewhat low, and then once all of them are spawned and the boss has got out of that phase, he wants to drag them all into a suppression field, then all the range will switch over to those adds and kill them as soon as possible. Now these adds can be mass gripped, stunned, slowed, pretty much anything except like hard CCs such as polymorph or anything like that. So if you want to get them in a suppression field without your tank having to enter one, if you can mass grip them in or do anything that you can to try and keep them in there while your tank is outside, then that would be a good thing. Otherwise, if you can't really do that, then just get them low, throw your tank in there, and just spam single target heals on your tank. Just keep him up. Just note that he won't be able to use any abilities because he will be silenced, so just make sure as a ranged DPS as well, kill those adds as soon as you possibly can, because your tank needs to go off and do other things soon.
Now another thing that happens when the boss does move into the center of the room and starts charging up his shield, another player in your group can also go inside the rune and charge their own personal shield. Now while they're standing in there, they start taking ticking damage, and they also get a debuff that reduces the amount of healing they receive by 35%. And the longer this player stands inside the rune, the bigger their own personal nullification barrier will be, and it caps out at 15 million.
Now only one player can enter the rune per phase, so per time the boss's shield gets removed. Now if this player has gone in, you cannot send another player in, even if that player inside has died or leaves themselves. And if you leave the rune accidentally as the person that's soaking up this shield, you can't enter it again. So if you do enter the rune, stay in there and get the biggest shield that you possibly can.
To make sure that the correct assigned player actually goes inside the rune instead of anyone else, it's a great idea to tank the boss slightly off center, and as soon as his shield is about to break, melee and tanks don't follow the boss towards the middle of the room. And as soon as he has reached the middle of the room and you can see the correct player charging his shield, it's then safe for you to run over and start DPSing the boss. So you're probably wondering, why the hell does someone need a 15 million damage absorb shield on them?
Well, the reason is that you need to be going around and soaking these overflowing energy orbs. Now these are orbs that spawn in the air and float to a random location. They'll then drop to the floor, which is marked by some green swirly shit on the floor, and if it does reach the floor, it will deal quite substantial AoE damage to the raid. Players standing inside of the green stuff will take 1 million damage, and this is completely unavoidable. You cannot DR it, you cannot immunity it, you cannot stop yourself taking from this 1 million damage, so you will die, and you're not even going to soak the orb. The orb will also do AoE damage to the raid, so don't stand in the green circle things unless you have the nullification barrier. If you have the nullification barrier and you do go under these green swirly shits, and they do land, 1 million damage will be taken off your shield, but there will be no AoE damage to the group. Now because of this, one player, whoever gets the barrier, will be spending the entire fight running around soaking as many orbs as they possibly can, so the player you do want to assign to do this is a mobile ranged DPS. Like, hunters are perfect. If you can bring a couple of hunters to this fight, you're going to be very, very happy. Now at the beginning of the encounter, you only have one orb, and of course you don't have a nullification barrier to really soak it, so this one orb will be going off, and pretty much throughout the entire fight, one orb is always going to be dropping because more and more of these orbs do spawn. Now when the shield does go down, you need to go and get yourself a shield, and then you can start soaking. However, because more and more orbs do spawn throughout the fight, you're going to need more and more and more shields. Now the rate in which the orbs spawn is not related to when Korag's shield goes down, so if you're not doing enough magic damage, you're not going to be receiving enough of these shields, so more and more of these orbs are going to accumulate, and then eventually like 5 are going to fall down and you're only going to be able to soak 2, and if that comes in at the same time as, I don't know, Expel Magic Shadow where you can't heal anyone, or Expel Magic Fire or Frost, that is potential one-hit territory. So this is really why you do need to have both magic and physical DPS, because magic dealing DPS will make it so you can actually get to the shield, and physical damage DPS are actually, you know, getting the boss down over a duration of time as well. So that's pretty much it. All you have to do is make sure that you do constantly keep sending in different people to go and get the nullification barrier, and to be honest, you want to assign about 3 or 4 people because that's how many nullification barriers you'll probably need before the boss actually dies. Those people will just run around throughout the entire fight, soaking these orbs, making sure that they can get as many as they possibly can, and you can also see where the orbs are going to land just by tilting your camera upwards, and you can see where the orbs are going to fly over to and then land. So as long as you do have good communication and you make sure that the correct people do get the nullification barriers and go and soak all of these orbs, you should take very minimal damage throughout the entire fight.
And that really is the key. Providing the raid doesn't take too much damage from the orbs, because there isn't enough shields to soak every single orb, like Alex said. You'll always have one land, so you should probably get used to that damage. But it's when that combos with other abilities that it starts to become deadly. So, providing you can deal with the orbs, the rest of the mechanics aren't too difficult to deal with. It's just about stacking up healing and moving to the right every single time.
That's pretty much it.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If this video did help you get a kill, please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to see other Highmaul guides, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and it'll take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.